The first snow of January 2017 had a strange quiet to it, the kind that swallowed the noise of Brooklyn whole. Even the elevated trains outside 39 Power Street sounded muted, like the city had finally stopped grinding its teeth. I was 23 then, working the closing shift at Millie's Diner, the kind of job where you reek of coffee, sweat, and burnt bacon no matter how many showers you take. My apartment was a cramped second-floor walk-up I shared with Jordan, an art student who painted through the night and smelled perpetually of turpentine and burnt espresso. We weren't in love, not really, but we were both clawing our way out of the same pit: student loans, messy breakups, and the naive belief that surviving in Brooklyn somehow meant we'd made it. That night, I was wiping down the counter when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I knew. My gut knew before my eyes did. Derek Lang, the name hit me like cold air. Derek, the guy who once threw a punch for me in high school, who could turn the dullest party into something unhinged. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since his last brawl in some Queens dive bar that ended with him disappearing from everyone's radar. I looked up from my phone, and there he was, Wayne, standing outside in the snow like a ghost pulled out of memory. His coat was too thin, his face hollowed, eyes raw from wind or something worse. "Evan," he said, his voice splintering at the edges. "You still in the city, man?" I didn't even think. Maybe guilt pushed me out the door. Maybe nostalgia. Maybe just the look of someone who'd run out of places to go. "You can crash for a few nights," I said. He grinned. That same reckless, familiar grin. His teeth chattered. "Few nights, huh? You'll regret that." I laughed because that's what we used to do. Laugh off the mess before it swallowed us. For the first couple of days, it almost felt easy. Derek cooked spaghetti, told wild stories about jobs he never kept and towns he never stayed in. Jordan tolerated him with polite half-smiles. For a moment, it was like being 20 again, except I wasn't, and chaos didn't feel charming anymore. By the end of the week, bottles began collecting on the counter. Derek's laugh got louder, his stories faster, as if his words were sprinting away from something invisible. Jordan started locking her door at night. One morning, she zipped her coat, eyes sharp. "He's your friend," she said, "but I didn't sign up for a third roommate who sleeps with a knife in his boot." Derek overheard. That night, he poured himself a drink and stared at me over the rim of the glass. "I'm not dangerous, man. Just wired wrong. You know how it is," I didn't answer. I just watched the snow blur the window and wondered when compassion turns into permission. By the second week, the apartment stank of beer and damp wool. I'd come home from Millie's and find Derek watching static on the TV, eyes glazed. Sometimes he'd leave the front door wide open, the wind creeping in like a warning. One night I woke to the hiss of gas. No flame, just the burners wide open. Derek sat at the kitchen table, head buried in his hands, a lighter resting beside him. "Jesus, Derek," I shouted, shaking him. He blinked up at me, dazed. "You shouldn't sneak up on people," he muttered. "Makes me nervous." After that, I couldn't sleep right. Every sound felt too close. I hid my rent money in a shoebox and kept my phone under my pillow. Jordan stopped coming home altogether. Derek started talking to himself in the mirror, mumbling like he was practicing lines. "You'll regret that," he'd whisper. The same words he'd said in the snow. Sometimes he'd say my name slowly, like he was trying to remember who I was. One night, around 3 a.m., I found him sitting in the dark living room. His face was blank, eyes wet. "I can't sleep," he whispered. "Everything's too loud. Even silence," he pointed toward the window. "Do you ever feel like someone's out there waiting for you to stop pretending?" The words slid into me like cold air under a door. I didn't answer. I just sat beside him until the sun came up. Two people pretending that proximity could fix something broken that deep. By mid-February, I was unraveling. My boss pulled me aside after I dropped a plate. "You okay, Carver?" "You look like a ghost." I wasn't okay. The apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. Jordan gave me an ultimatum. Either he's gone, or I am. That night I found Derek in the kitchen, pouring whiskey into a coffee mug. "We need to talk," I said. He looked up when I said his name. That's always a bad sign, when someone looks at you like they already know what's coming. "You've got to leave, man," I said, trying to sound firm, not angry. His lips twitched. "Where? You think I've got somewhere else to go? You left the gas on, Derek. You scared Jordan." He laughed, sharp and bitter, the kind of sound that makes you take a step back before you realize it. "Jordan doesn't know what scared is. Something inside me just..." snapped. "This isn't high school anymore. I can't fix you." For a second, his face changed, like he didn't expect that. There was hurt there, genuine and small, but then something else flickered behind his eyes. Something darker. Understanding, maybe, or resignation. "I just needed somewhere to breathe, man," he said quietly, his voice shaking. "You were supposed to be my friend." "I am," I told him, backing toward my room. "But I need sleep. We'll figure something out tomorrow." He repeated it like a prayer. Tomorrow. When I finally lay down, my pulse wouldn't slow. The air in my chest felt tight, like I'd swallowed guilt whole. I was afraid of what Derek might do, but more afraid of what I might do if he pushed me any further. At 4 a.m., something crashed. Not glass and heavier, wood. I bolted upright, heart hammering. The front door was splintered, hanging off its hinges. The cold wind poured in, burning my bare skin. "Derek?" I called, stepping into the hallway. Nothing. Just the whisper of snow through the broken frame. By morning, Jordan was home again. Her eyes widened when she saw the mess. The couch gutted, my guitar snapped in two, her sketchbook pages scattered like feathers across the floor. On the counter sat a note. The paper crumpled and stained with something that looked like coffee, or blood. "You were right to be afraid." I finally stopped pretending. The cops came, wrote things down, shrugged when I asked what they'd do. "He's an adult," one said. "If he shows up again, call us." 2 weeks later, they found him near the East River, dehydrated, incoherent, muttering about voices that told him to stay awake. They admitted him to a psychiatric ward for evaluation. When I visited, he didn't know me. His eyes slid past my face, following something over my shoulder that wasn't there. And then he smiled, soft, almost peaceful, like someone watching a movie only he could see. I walked out and just kept walking, all the way until my legs gave out somewhere around Atlantic Avenue. When I got home, Jordan was packing. We didn't fight. There wasn't anything left to argue about. Some endings don't need words. They're just exhaustion dressed as acceptance. We left the apartment a week later. Months passed. I found a new place in Queens. Smaller, cleaner, quieter. I told myself I was fine. I smiled at customers. I worked doubles. I tried to sleep through the night, but I still double-locked every door. Still woke up at the smallest creak. Still checked the stove twice before leaving. Then one humid night in June, after closing the diner, I went for a walk. The air smelled like wet asphalt and overripe trash. Out of habit, my feet took me to 39 Power Street. The building looked exactly the same. Peeling paint, that same flickering hallway light that never stayed fixed. I almost smiled, thinking how far I'd come, and then I saw it. Up on the 3rd floor behind our old curtains was a figure. Still, tall, watching. I blinked. The window was empty. Maybe it was a reflection. Maybe it wasn't. I stood there for a long time, the rain soaking through my shirt, staring up at that dark, hollow window. The snow was gone, replaced by warm summer rain, but I felt the same chill I'd felt that first night, the kind that starts in your bones. I thought about Derek, the kid who once saved me, the man I couldn't save back. About what he said in the snow that night. Few nights you'll regret that, he was right. But not the way he meant, because regret isn't always about what someone did to you. Sometimes it's about the part of you that let them stay. Loyalty is a beautiful thing, until it becomes a chain. Sometimes the hardest part of friendship is knowing when to walk away. Not because you stopped caring, but because staying means losing yourself. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be found. And love, in any form, should never cost you your peace. It started as a joke, like every dumb thing we used to do. The summer of 2013 in Havbrook, Maine was a blur of heat, mosquitoes, and boredom so thick it made you reckless. I was 19, home from college, already regretting coming back. But Eli Graham had other plans. Eli was the kind of guy who could make even disaster sound like adventure. Magnetic, fearless, maybe a little too much of both. He'd bought this old camcorder from a pawn shop, convinced we could start a YouTube channel about local urban legends. "People eat that shit up," he said, grinning. "Ghost hunters, mystery woods, spooky voiceovers." Boom, 100,000 views. He roped in his girlfriend Jess, and my cousin Noah. Our first episode was supposed to be Briar Hollow Forest, a patch of damp, forgotten woods on the edge of town. The local story went that a drifter lived there in the 80s, an ex-hunter who disappeared after folks started finding deer carcasses hanging from trees like trophies. Creepy, sure, but perfect for a video. We'll fake something, Eli said. Couple of night shots, throw in a scream. Easy. We got to the forest just as the sun sank behind the pines, staining everything this dim copper color. The air smelled like wet earth and rot. Eli carried the camcorder, a flashlight wrapped in peeling tape, and enough batteries to light a football field. We couldn't stop laughing. At the bugs, at each other tripping over roots, at how ridiculous we looked pretending to be ghost hunters. By 2 a.m, we were done. Sweaty, bitten, exhausted. The woods had gone still except for crickets. Ghosts aren't real, I said, smiling to shake the unease that clung to the silence. Eli smirked, half serious. Not until we make one. 2 days later, he called me. His voice was low, tight. Dude, did you go back after we left?
What? No, why?
There's another flashlight behind the shed. I laughed until he sent me the frame. Grainy, dark. But there it was, a tall, thin shape holding a light, angled straight toward the camera. Not one of us. We went back that weekend. Of course we did. Eli was already buzzing with theories. He brought new cameras, extra batteries, and some cheap night vision attachment he found online. Jess refused to come. You guys need a hobby that doesn't involve dying, she said, slamming the car door. Noah and I followed Eli into the woods. The trail felt tighter this time, like the trees were bending inward. When we reached the old shed, Eli crouched and pointed at something carved into the wood, a crude eye surrounded by scratch marks. What the hell? I whispered. Eli's breath fogged the lens. It's a message, he said, filming close. Not funny anymore, I muttered, feeling something cold crawl up my spine. But Eli didn't stop. I could tell his brain was already editing the video, adding sound effects in his head. On the walk back, Noah froze. Do you hear that? Hear what? Breathing. We stopped, listened. The air moved, but it wasn't wind. It was slow, deliberate, wet, like someone exhaling through their teeth. We practically ran to the car. My phone buzzed just as I slammed the door. Unknown number. One message: you shouldn't have come back. I showed Eli, waiting for him to laugh. He didn't. He just stared into the dark tree line, face pale in the dashboard light. That night, he uploaded the footage. The Watcher in Briar Hollow. Within 2 days, it had 3,000 views. The comments were wild. People claiming to see faces in the trees, something moving behind us. One comment stuck with me. There's someone standing behind you at 412. Then Eli went quiet. For a week, no calls, no texts. When I finally drove out to his trailer, the curtains were drawn. Inside, the glow of a TV flickered. I could hear something looping and our footage playing over and over. When he opened the door, his face looked drained, sickly gray. I think he's out there, he whispered. Who? The guy. The one from the video. You mean the one we faked? He shook his head slowly. No, the one who was already there. After that, Eli unraveled. He spent nights outside with a flashlight, scanning the woods, whispering into the dark like it would whisper back. He filmed everything, certain he'd catch the Watcher again. He stopped sleeping. Jess tried to pull him back to reality, begged him to come inside to turn it off. One night she screamed at him, "You brought it home, Eli." He just glared, shaking, muttering something I couldn't hear. She left 2 days later. I stayed. Maybe out of loyalty, maybe guilt. But mostly because when I looked into those woods, I started to believe him. But the footage told a story we couldn't explain. There were angles we'd never filmed, perspectives no one could have captured unless they were there with us. Frames that panned slowly through the dark, as if someone was moving just beyond our flashlight beams watching us. In one screenshot, you could see the outline of a shoulder behind a tree, half hidden. In another, the glint of a light that wasn't ours. It was like we'd been part of someone else's movie without realizing it. By late August, Eli barely looked human. His skin had gone pale, almost waxy. Dark crescents sagged under his eyes and his hands shook constantly. He'd started sleeping in short bursts, camera always within reach. Every noise, a creak, a gust, a bird, it made him flinch. When I told him to stop, to take a break, he laughed. This dry, empty laugh that didn't sound like him anymore. "If I stop," he said, eyes fixed on the forest outside his trailer window, "I'll miss it. I can't miss it." A week later, his trailer burned. The fire chief said it was faulty wiring. "Electrical surge," he muttered, clipboard shaking slightly in his hand. But that didn't make sense. Eli unplugged everything at night. He was paranoid about power drains. Noah and I went through the remains the next morning. Everything was blackened, melted, unrecognizable, and except for the camcorder. The body was warped from heat, but the SD card inside had survived. We watched it in my living room with the curtains drawn, the lights off. Hours of grainy night footage filled the screen. Eli alone in Briar Hollow, whispering into the dark, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The camera drifted past trees, broken branches, and the occasional glint of eyeshine. Animal maybe, maybe not. Each clip was darker, the air heavier, the silence thicker. Then came the final recording. Timestamp 2:37 a.m. Eli was breathing hard. The camera pointed at his face, and pale, slick with sweat. "If you're watching this," he said quietly, "it's real. It doesn't like being watched, but it wants you to see." He turned the camera toward the woods. Between two trees stood a figure. Tall, stooped, human-shaped, but wrong. The shadows didn't sit right on it. Its limbs looked too long, its posture too aware. As Eli stepped closer, it tilted its head, perfectly mirroring him like a distorted reflection. Then the camera fell. Static filled the room, high and sharp, like a scream trapped in electricity. The police combed through everything. No footprints. No signs of a struggle. No smoke damage beyond the obvious. They called the video tampered, said the whole thing was an unfortunate accident. But the town changed after that. The next summer, brush fires started breaking out around Briar Hollow. Locals joked that it was Eli, that his ghost was haunting the woods trying to finish the story. Hikers reported seeing a tall shape in the smoke, something that moved when the wind didn't. I moved away that fall, deleted the channel, wiped every file. I blocked anyone who brought it up. For a while, I let myself believe it was over. Then last winter, I got an email. No subject line, no text. Just one attachment. A photo. It was taken from inside my apartment. I was sitting at my desk in the picture, editing footage. My reflection showed faintly in the window glass. But behind me, in that faint reflection, stood something tall and blurred, like a coat rack out of focus, except it wasn't. Because in the reflection, I could see the fabric of my curtain move slightly, a slow, rhythmic pulse, breathing. My heart stopped cold. I didn't move for an hour. When I finally turned, there was nothing there, just my empty apartment, silent and still. Since that night, I've learned that curiosity comes with a cost. What started as a joke, a dumb summer project, a little ghost hunting for laughs, wasn't harmless after all. There are things in this world that notice when you look too long. Some corners aren't meant to be lit. I don't go near Briar Hollow anymore. I don't film urban legends. I don't answer unknown numbers, because watching isn't always safe. Sometimes the moment you decide to observe something, it starts observing you back. There are boundaries in this life, invisible ones that protect us from what we don't understand. And the more you push past them, the more you invite something that doesn't want to be found. Curiosity can open doors, but it can also wake things that should have stayed sleeping. When I transferred to the University of Washington for graduate studies in criminal psychology, I thought I was starting over. Seattle felt like a reset button, a city big enough that no one knew my name or my father's sudden death the year before. I could just be Noah Reed, 24, carrying my grief quietly, like a backpack full of bricks I didn't know how to set down. That's when I met Caleb Rhodes's. Not in a classroom or the dorms, but on a late-night discussion board about ethics in law enforcement. He was sharp, precise, and almost unnervingly curious. His posts were long, too long, written at 3 a.m., dissecting human behavior like a surgeon. What do people do when no one's watching? How far will they go when rules stop mattering? At first, I thought he was mentoring me. God knows I needed that. Caleb lived on the outskirts of Tacoma, in a warehouse he'd converted into a home/laboratory of sorts. The first time I visited, I was struck by the order. Labeled boxes, neat rows of psychology texts. a record player spinning old piano pieces. The air smelled faintly of dust and oil paint. Everything was deliberate, symmetrical. Somehow it quieted the chaos in my own head. We became friends quickly, the kind who could go weeks without contact, then spend an entire night arguing over morality and human depravity, usually with cheap bourbon in hand. He was brilliant, but in a way that made brilliance seem dangerous, the kind that grows wild when no one tells it to stop. Still, there were gaps. He never mentioned family, said he worked in contract security, but the details never lined up. Once I asked if he liked his job. He stared at his glass, then said softly, "It keeps me aware of who disappears and who doesn't." I laughed awkwardly. He didn't. Looking back, 2018 was when things began to tilt. I'd finished my degree, finally felt stable, until Caleb called one night. His voice was slurred, panicked, frayed at the edges. "Need a place to crash," he muttered, "just for a few nights." My girlfriend, Hannah, wasn't thrilled, but old friends don't get turned away. He showed up with a single duffel bag smelling like cold metal and sleeplessness. He checked the locks twice, unplugged Alexa, shut every curtain tight even though it was the middle of the day. When I joked about it, he looked at me, pale, serious. "You think the world's not watching?" he said. "It always is." That week was uneasy but manageable. We talked, made coffee, debated criminal profiles, even laughed sometimes, but he'd drift off mid-sentence, head cocked like he was listening to something only he could hear. One evening, out of nowhere, he asked, "If someone told you the truth about everything, governments, people, could you handle it?" I chuckled nervously. "Depends on the truth," he smiled faintly. "Good answer. Don't go looking then." By the weekend, Hannah had had enough. She told him it was time to move on. He didn't argue. He just nodded, zipped his duffel, and before leaving said, "You'll hear from me when it matters." Then he was gone. 2 years passed. Hannah and I moved to Seattle, got engaged, built something quiet and normal. I found a job in behavioral analysis. For the first time in years, I felt safe until the day that envelope showed up. No return address, just my name, and inside, a flash drive with a single note. "You asked what people are capable of." I hesitated before plugging it in. The drive contained folders named after strangers, men and women I didn't know. Inside, meticulous surveillance logs, maps marked with red pins, public records, missing persons reports, and Caleb, a photograph of him, thinner, eyes hollow, standing before a wall covered in red strings and newspaper clippings. My stomach turned. I went to the police, embarrassed by how paranoid it made me sound. Weeks later, an officer called back. Caleb's listed address led to an abandoned storage unit. Inside were boxes of notebooks and one message scrawled across a piece of cardboard. "Don't follow me." They already do. After that, he was gone. Vanished. For months, I told myself he'd taken another contract, gone off-grid, something logical, something normal. But at night, I'd reread our old emails and notice things I hadn't before, words that mirrored mine, patterns that felt deliberate. It was as if he'd been quoting me, predicting me. Every few months, a new email would arrive from a disposable address. Always blank except for a single line, "You're safer not knowing," or I kept my promise. Hannah told me to block them. I did. They kept coming. Then, last October, I saw him, a rusted pickup in the parking lot outside my office. A figure in the driver's seat, profile turned just enough for me to recognize him, or someone who looked exactly like him. I blinked, and the truck was gone. Only the faint smell of diesel hung in the air. After that, my mind began to come apart, quietly, almost politely, one piece at a time. I started double-checking the locks every night, not just a quick twist, but pulling each handle twice until the metal clicked. I counted the windows before bed, traced every shadow that stretched across the sidewalk outside. At work, I stopped leaving my coffee mug unattended. Email sat unopened until I could verify the sender. Every vibration of my phone sent a cold knot through my stomach. The world around me grew sharper. I noticed everything: the rhythm of a neighbor's footsteps, the low idle of a delivery van, the way someone lingered just a little too long near my car. Caleb's voice played on repeat in my head. It keeps me aware of who disappears and who doesn't. I still couldn't tell if it had been a warning or a threat. My life became a quiet performance of vigilance. Observation, suspicion, avoidance. I felt like I was already being counted, mapped, cataloged in someone else's design. Even Hannah could see it. "You're not safe," she said one night, her voice trembling. "You're letting him get inside your head, Noah." But I couldn't stop. It wasn't fear anymore, it was infection. A slow creeping thing that spread through my routines. Every unlocked door, every creak in the walls, every moment alone set my nerves on fire. I wanted to tell someone, a colleague, the police, anyone. But how could I explain? Caleb, the brilliant ghost of a man who'd vanished, whose blank emails kept finding me. Who would believe me when I couldn't even prove he still existed? So I stayed quiet. That silence became a part of me, heavy and constant. I tried to act normal. Went to work, smiled when people talked, even joined friends for dinner. But when night came, I'd sit in front of my computer, retracing Caleb's messages, examining his notes, rehearing his questions. Every line I'd once ignored now felt purposeful, coded, like he'd been warning me about something I wasn't ready to see. After the parking lot incident, the paranoia bloomed into something raw and physical. I carried my phone everywhere, checked reflections in car windows, crossed streets twice. My eyes never stopped scanning. Then one cold evening I saw him again. I was walking past a cafe downtown when I froze. Across the street, beneath a flickering street lamp, stood a man in a dark jacket, hood drawn low. Even from that distance, I knew. The way he stood, motionless, observing, it was Caleb. He didn't move. Didn't wave. Just watched. My pulse spiked so fast I felt dizzy. I crossed the street in the opposite direction, half running until I was inside my apartment, door bolted, breath shaking. I didn't look out the window. I didn't have to. Caleb had always known how to be seen without ever being there. It wasn't just physical anymore. He lived in my head, in the way I anticipated movement, filtered thoughts, second-guessed intentions. He'd built a space inside me where his voice could echo without sound. The absence of him was louder than any confrontation could have been. Even my co-workers started to notice. "You okay, man? You look off," one of them said. I lied, smiled, changed the subject. Hannah tried to pull me back, but every time I relaxed, I felt the world tilt, like I'd just turned my back to something watching. The blank emails still came, sometimes months apart, sometimes 2 in a week. Each one a tiny reminder, I'm still here. Every idle truck parked near our building made my throat tighten. Every quiet moment reminded me that my life was no longer entirely mine. It's been years now. Caleb hasn't hurt me, not directly, but he doesn't need to. His influence lingers like static, woven into the way I see the world. I've installed cameras, changed my routes to work, documented every unexplained sound. I tell myself it's just precaution. Deep down, I know it's devotion to a paranoia that's become my companion. Sometimes I wonder if I've already crossed that invisible line, if I'm halfway gone into the same reality Caleb warned me about. Knowledge does that. It cuts both ways. The more you understand people, their motives, their masks, the harder it becomes to trust them. Trust, I've learned, is delicate. Truth heavier than fear. But denial has its own weight, the kind that crushes quietly, so I stay alert. I watch, I record. I remind myself that not every force in life is meant to be controlled. Some are meant to keep us cautious, to remind us how easily the mind slips when someone else knows the rules better than you do. Because disappearing isn't always about vanishing. Sometimes it's the slow erasure of who you were, one quiet realization at a time, the moment when what you know becomes heavier than the life you thought you had. Returning to Willow Creek after my freshman year of college felt like stepping into an old photograph. Colors slightly faded, edges too sharp. The river shimmered faintly under the September sun, and the air smelled like wet leaves and burnt coffee from the diner that had somehow survived another decade. The trees had only just begun to turn, gold creeping into green like memory into the present. Everything was familiar, comforting yet smaller, like the town had shrunk in my absence. Or maybe I'd just outgrown it. I had left as Clara Jensen, ambitious, certain, hungry for something beyond small-town repetition. Coming back, I was still Clara, but heavier now, with the quiet weight of lectures, roommates, and the realization that the world was far more complicated than I'd once imagined. Reconnecting with Brinley Knox was inevitable. She'd been my other half since middle school, the only one who matched my restless energy. She met me outside the diner, wind tangling her hair into a wild halo. "You made it," she said, that reckless grin spreading across her face. "Didn't forget me after all those emails, huh?" "Never," I laughed, though I might have forgotten how small this town is. She rolled her eyes. "Still a snob, I see." We fell into step like no time had passed, walking, talking, filling in the blanks of a year apart. She was still magnetic, still brave in that impulsive way that used to pull us into trouble. But as the weeks slipped by, I noticed subtle shifts. Brinley was quieter when Logan Vance was around. Logan was different, older, self-assured, the kind of calm that draws people in. But beneath it, there was something taut, something coiled too tight. A flash in his eyes when Brinley laughed too loudly, a pause in his jaw when she spoke too freely. "He's protective," Brinley said once, tossing her hair and smiling like she was defending him from an invisible jury. "He just cares a lot. Sometimes too much." "Protective?" I asked. "That's not the same as control, Bryn." She laughed it off. "You don't get it, Clara. He's perfect for me." But her defiance softened. Her spark dimmed. Arguments became whispers. Laughter turned cautious. The Brinley who once shouted at injustice now measured her tone before every sentence. By the end of 2014, she'd become a fixture in Logan's orbit. Beautiful, obedient, smaller. I'd moved on to grad school. Our conversations shrank into occasional texts, strained phone calls. She always sounded cheerful enough, but there was a tension under her voice, a kind of hesitation I couldn't quite define. Then, late summer 2016, I got a message that stopped my breath. Something happened. I tried to fix it. My hands shook as I drove through Willow Creek, the streets both familiar and foreign. At Brinley's house, she looked pale and hollow, her wildness replaced by a brittle calm. "Logan's apartment," she said quietly, twisting her fingers together. "Someone broke in. Papers everywhere. Furniture smashed." Her hands trembled as she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "It's Emily," she said. "She's gone." "Emily?" I asked. "Logan's fiancée," she murmured. "Dead, they're calling it a suicide." But her tone said otherwise. I leaned forward. "Then why are the police looking at you, Bryn?" She looked away. "Because I know things no one else does." The chill that went through me wasn't from the air. Brinley's words sat like a shadow in my chest. She moved carefully now, as if each step might crack the ground beneath her. Logan was eventually convicted. Life sentence, airtight evidence. His guilt was undeniable. But Brinley's part in it all remained murky, half-glimpsed, never spoken aloud. I stayed by her side that winter, trying to help her untangle the threads of what she'd seen, what she'd done. She was calm now, controlled, always scanning the corners of rooms, always aware of exits. I spent nights digging through articles, police reports, trial transcripts. A pattern began to form. Brinley was always there, on the edges of every crucial moment. Never directly involved, but never absent either, watching, recording. One evening, I confronted her at her kitchen table. "You were there, Brinley. You saw everything." She smiled faintly, eyes steady on mine. "I told you, Clara, I know things." I stared at her. "Do you realize what that implies? You could have stopped him." She stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking softly against porcelain. "I did what I could," she said. "Some things aren't meant to be stopped by one person." Her tone was light, but the air between us thickened. This wasn't the reckless Brinley I'd grown up with. This was someone colder, sharper, someone who understood exactly how far perception could bend before it broke. Someone who knew how to hide inside the truth. She wasn't Logan, but she had learned how to pull strings the way he once did, quietly, invisibly. Every text she sent, every look, every pause in a conversation carried intent. There was no impulsiveness left in her, only calculation. You could feel it when she spoke. The weight of what she wasn't saying pressing down heavier than her words. Whatever secrets she carried had become armor, and that made it impossible to tell what had been real between us and what had been carefully designed. Months later, Brinley came back from her so-called time away. She looked composed, hair sleek, makeup minimal, a quiet self-possession that felt new. Around her neck hung the same silver locket Logan had given her years ago. I noticed it immediately, how she touched it when she spoke, like a habit she didn't realize she still had. But she never mentioned him. She never mentioned anything from before. She just moved through the evening with unshakable calm, as though the past had been edited out of her entirely. During dinner, her phone rang. The sound was soft but startling in the stillness. She glanced at the screen, then answered with an almost lazy confidence. "Hey," she said, her voice smooth. After a few seconds, she slipped the phone into her pocket, eyes flicking up to meet mine. "It's him," she said. My stomach nodded. "Who?" "The one who wants to know what really happened." Her lips curved slightly. "And I'm the only one who knows." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The room felt colder. The way she said it, lightly, almost playfully, made my skin crawl. I realized then that Brinley's power didn't come from action, but from what she knew. Her silence had become her leverage. She didn't need to do anything. Just by existing, she held authority. She was untouchable, calm in the storm, immune to consequence. She hadn't been reckless. She hadn't been innocent either. She'd been deliberate, careful, watching everything, and somewhere along the way she'd learned how to make the truth work for her. I left that night with the uneasy feeling that I'd just been studied. The dark Vermont road stretched out endlessly, headlights flickering over wet pavement. I kept thinking about every laugh we'd shared, every time she'd brushed off my concern, every warning I hadn't listened to. Even when she wasn't there, her presence lingered, like perfume that refuses to fade, or a thought that loops endlessly. Over the years, I tried to reconstruct what really happened, through fragments she'd let slip, old court documents, secondhand rumors. Logan's guilt was undeniable, but Brinley's place in it blurred the more I looked. She was always nearby when something happened, always aware but never directly implicated, a ghost in the margins. Now living hundreds of miles away, I sometimes catch myself checking the things I own, like she might have left a trace somewhere. There's a locket I wear sometimes, one I bought long after everything ended, but when the light hits it just right, I think of hers. And I swear I can almost hear her voice again, soft and close. "I'm the only one who knows what really happened." That sentence echoes in me. Not because it's threatening, but because it's true. Some truths are dangerous not because of what they reveal, but because of who holds them. Brinley had survived by turning knowledge into currency, never lying outright, never exposing too much, just shaping what people believed. Power without confrontation, control without blame. I don't know whether to admire her or fear her. Maybe both, and that, I suspect, is exactly how she wanted it. Brinley Knox exists somewhere beyond certainty, untouchable, unreadable, always one step ahead of interpretation. I think about the warning I once gave her years ago. Careful control isn't the same as care. She just smiled back then, like she already knew how that sentence would age. She taught me something, though. Influence doesn't always need noise or violence. Sometimes presence alone, steady, watching, waiting, is enough to alter everything. Even now, I wonder if knowing someone else's truth is a privilege or a curse. I think of Brinley and understand, finally, that some truths are best left buried and some people never stop watching. The story of Brinley Knox stays with me because it isn't just about guilt or innocence. It's about the quiet power of knowledge, the kind that shapes reality without ever being spoken aloud. And I've learned this much. Silence, when chosen carefully, can carry more consequence than any confession. Some truths are dangerous precisely because only one person knows them, and she always will. When I first moved to Portland, I didn't expect much to change. I was 24, broke, and clinging to the idea of being an illustrator, though most of what I did was sketch for freelance clients who either paid late or not at all. After my lease fell through, I lived out of a duffel bag for 2 weeks, crashing on a friend's couch until desperation made me answer an ad online. The post was simple: room for rent. Quiet tenant preferred. No pets, no smoking. The photo showed a small, neat apartment near Hawthorne Street. 1 bedroom available, utilities included. Rent dirt cheap for the area. It looked too good to be true, but I called anyway. Leah Winters answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, smooth, almost soothing. "You can come by today if you'd like," she said. "I don't rent to many people. I like peace." When I arrived that afternoon, the building looked older but well kept. A narrow 3-story structure painted a faded pale green. Leah met me at the door. Early 30s, dark hair tied neatly back and a polite smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. Inside, the place was spotless. Every surface gleamed. The couch cushions sat perfectly aligned like something from a catalog. Even the air smelled clean. Lemon with a faint trace of something sharper underneath. Almost sterile. "The room's at the end of the hall," she said softly. "You keep it really tidy," I offered, trying to sound friendly. "I like order," she replied, pausing just a beat before adding, "You should too." Her tone wasn't threatening, just factual. The bedroom was small but bright, with a wide window overlooking the street. I took it without a second thought. After weeks of couch-hopping, silence and structure sounded like a blessing. The first week was perfect. Leah barely spoke except to offer tea or remind me to lock the door. She worked from home, bookkeeping, I think, and rarely left the apartment. She was kind if distant. For the first time in months, I slept without the sound of traffic or roommates arguing through thin walls. But calm can start to feel off when it's too perfect. By the second week, I began noticing small things, tiny details that didn't make sense. Sometimes I heard faint laughter through the walls late at night. Even though Leah swore she went to bed early, I'd wake to find the kitchen chairs slightly moved or my bedroom door cracked open when I was sure I'd closed it. It didn't seem worth mentioning. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe she was just eccentric. Then one morning I was sketching by the window when Leah walked by behind me and said quietly, "You always draw here around 8. The light hits your hand so nicely." I froze. She'd been in her room when I started, or so I thought. By the second month, the tension had built to something I couldn't ignore. Leah had become observant, too observant. She noticed everything. What time I woke up, what I ate, how long I spent in the shower. Once I came home with takeout. Before I could even set it down, she said, "Tie again. You never finish the noodles." I laughed, trying to brush it off. "Guess I'm predictable." She tilted her head. "We all are if someone pays attention long enough." Her words lingered with me longer than they should have. She wasn't unkind, just unnervingly specific. Every movement, every gesture seemed deliberate. She never raised her voice or looked angry, but sometimes I caught her watching me a moment too long, her eyes following the way I breathed, as if memorizing it. There were rules too, odd, precise ones. No shoes in the hallway. Keep the bathroom mirror dry. Don't touch the second shelf in the fridge. It was easier to obey than to ask why. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling she moved things when I wasn't home. My sketchbook sometimes faced a different way. My pencils weren't exactly where I'd left them. Once my wallet lay open on my desk, nothing missing, just open. When I asked her about it, she smiled faintly. "You must be imagining things, Elliot. You get forgetful when you don't sleep." She wasn't wrong. I was sleeping less. The late-night noises kept me awake, the muffled giggles, the faint footsteps pacing the hallway. But every time I checked, Leah's door was shut, the light beneath it dark. One night I knocked. No answer. But I could hear breathing, slow, deliberate, right on the other side. That's when I started locking my door. By early April, I was already thinking seriously about moving out. I couldn't relax in that apartment anymore. Every creak, every sigh of the walls felt deliberate, like the place was breathing in rhythm with Leah. Every silence was too precise, like the calm before a question you didn't want answered. Leah, on the other hand, seemed to glow. She was suddenly lighter, more talkative, almost cheerful. She started asking about my sketches, about my parents, even about old girlfriends. I gave short, polite answers, hoping small talk would keep her steady. Then, one Friday night, she poured us both glasses of wine. "To new beginnings," she said, raising hers slightly. "New beginnings?" I asked. She smiled thinly. "You'll see." I drank out of courtesy. Halfway through the glass, her tone shifted, soft but strange. "You're a good roommate," she said. "Better than the last one." "You had someone else living here before me?" Her laugh was low, uneven, the kind that felt wrong in the quiet. "For a while, but he didn't listen to the rules." She set her glass down too hard. Red drops spattered across the counter. She stared at them for a long time, expression tightening. "It's ugly when things stain," she whispered. That night, I woke to the sound of something dragging against the floor. Slow. Scraping. I sat up, heart pounding, grabbed my phone, and turned on the flashlight. The beam landed on a kitchen knife lying on the carpet just outside my bedroom door. I froze, pulse thudding in my ears. I bent to pick it up carefully, trying to make sense of it. When Leah appeared at the end of the hallway, half her face lost to shadow. "You left the light on," she said softly. "What?" My voice cracked. "What is this?" She smiled, calm, serene. "Just thought I'd help." Then she turned and disappeared into her room, closing the door behind her as if nothing had happened. I didn't sleep again that night. By sunrise, I was done. I threw everything I owned into 2 bags and waited until I heard the shower running before I dragged them toward the front door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even lock up. I just left. I took the first bus downtown and checked into a cheap motel with peeling wallpaper and a flickering sign. I stayed there for a week, trying to convince myself I'd overreacted. That afternoon, she texted me, "You forgot your mug. Please come get it. Don't forget me." I blocked the number. Then came the emails. Dozens of them. Each one some variation of the same message. "Don't forget me. You left too early. You ruined it." The last one said, "You'll see me again when you sleep." I never replied. 2 months later, I moved into a new apartment across town. No roommates. No shared anything. I told myself it was over. But at night, I still caught myself checking the locks twice, sometimes 3 times. My reflection in the window looked like someone waiting for something to return. Once, half asleep, I thought I heard faint laughter through the vent. I told myself it was the neighbor's TV. It's been years since I left Hawthorne Street. I'm 30 now. Steady job designing posters for local bands, a handful of friends, a small apartment that's never perfectly clean. I like it that way. I can't sleep unless something's a little out of place. My couch crooked. My books uneven. Chaos feels safe now. Last month I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of white paper. "You left the light on. No signature." I told myself it was a prank. It had to be. I threw it away, but I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I kept thinking about her. Her steady voice, the way she watched me, the faint trace of lemon and antiseptic that clung to every inch of that apartment. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe she was dangerous. Maybe those things were never that different. I still dream about that place sometimes. It's spotless. Silent. I'm standing in the doorway holding a mug I've never seen before. Behind me, a voice laughs softly. "Don't forget me. I always wake before I turn around." Sometimes, the scariest people aren't monsters or ghosts. They're the ones who hide their loneliness behind control. What looks like perfection can be a cage meant to keep you close, not safe. Pay attention to the quiet boundaries people draw around you. When kindness starts to feel like surveillance, it's already too late, because not every home is meant to be shared. They say you can't outrun heartbreak, but in September 2018, I damn sure tried. After Jenna and I imploded, 3 years of love, shouting matches, and one spectacular breakup, I packed what was left of my life into my beat-up Honda and drove west to Portland. The plan was simple: new city, new apartment, new me. The sublet ad had looked decent enough. Downtown studio, shared kitchen, affordable rent. That last part sealed it. When I pulled up to the building on 9th Street, I found a narrow brick structure that leaned slightly forward, like it was tired of holding itself up. The hallways smelled faintly of old coffee and bleach. My new roommate, Victor Heron, greeted me with a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was tall, lean, and unsettlingly still, the kind of person who looked like he was always listening to something only he could hear. "Ethan Caldwell," he said, extending a hand. His voice was smooth and deliberate. "Yeah, thanks for letting me take the room," I replied. He nodded once. "You'll find it quiet here." I like quiet. His room sat at the far end of the apartment. Mine was just off the living area. Everything looked spotless, too spotless. Not tidy, but scrubbed raw, like someone was trying to erase the memory of what used to be there. He told me he worked night security at some corporate office nearby. That suited me fine. My cafe job kept me out late too. The first week went by peacefully. We passed like ghosts in the hallway. Him leaving when I came home, me leaving when he returned. I figured that was perfect roommate chemistry, until the noises started. It began one night around 3 a.m. I woke to the sound of the front door clicking open, followed by a heavy dragging noise across the floor, then running water. I told myself he'd just brought home a big bag of something, cleaning supplies maybe, or groceries. But when it happened again, night after night, it got harder to rationalize. Working late again? I asked one morning as he poured coffee, calm as ever. He didn't look up. Always something to clean up, he murmured. He didn't elaborate. By week 3, I started noticing smaller things. My coffee mug ended up in the wrong cabinet. My shoes were turned neatly inward by the door. A towel I'd left damp was suddenly dry. Nothing major, just enough to make me question my own memory. Still, I told myself it was just the adjustment. New place, new routines. Maybe I was overtired. That's what I wanted to believe. 2 weeks later, I woke again, 3:07 a.m. this time. The dragging noise was slower, heavier. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped into the hallway barefoot. The bathroom light was on. Inside, the tub brimmed with murky water swirling slowly, thick with dirt or something darker. Beneath the surface floated strands of dark hair, long, curling, drifting as if arranged that way. "Victor?" I whispered. No answer. My pulse thudded in my ears. I blinked once and the water stilled, perfectly calm. I backed away. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I was half asleep. I didn't check again until morning. When I did, the tub was spotless. Not a single trace of dirt or hair remained. That day at work, I was useless. I spilled 2 coffees, burned milk, over-frothed every cappuccino. My mind kept circling back to that tub. When I got home, Victor was sitting at the kitchen table reading an old paperback. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "You've been cleaning in the middle of the night." He looked up, head tilting just slightly. His eyes were sharp, unreadable. "I like things clean," he said evenly. "Helps me think." "What were you cleaning last night?" I asked. "The past," he said, smiling faintly. I gave a nervous laugh, waiting for the joke that never came. He went back to reading. That night, I installed a small camera on the hallway shelf, aimed toward the bathroom door. It was just for peace of mind, I told myself. I'd delete the footage once I saw nothing weird was happening. The next morning, the camera was gone. In its place, taped to the bathroom mirror, was a note. No filming in shared spaces. My throat went dry. I didn't mention it. Instead, I started staying late at the cafe, volunteering to mop floors until sunrise. By the time I got home, he'd usually be asleep or pretending to be. Something about his quiet unnerved me more than anger ever could. By October, the tension in that apartment had thickened, heavy and humid, like the air before a storm. I tried to keep my distance, headphones on, quick showers, meals eaten out. But Victor had a way of appearing silently in doorways like he'd been there all along waiting. One evening, I came home early to grab a jacket. The front door was unlocked. Every cupboard hung open, drawers cracked like someone had been searching for something they couldn't find. Victor stood in the kitchen, staring into the empty sink as if expecting something to appear. "You lose something?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He turned slowly, eyes unreadable. "I was starting to get used to you, Ethan." My stomach tightened. "Okay, that's good, right?" He smiled, not wide, not warm, just measured, precise. "I like when people stay." That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jolt, the creak of the pipes, the whisper of wind against the glass. Around 2 a.m., my doorknob rattled once, twice, then went still. I lay frozen, barely breathing. The next morning, over the sound of his coffee brewing, I told him, "I think I might move out." He didn't flinch. "People leave," he said quietly. "It's in their nature. I'll be gone by Friday." He looked up then, smiling faintly. "Take your time. No rush." That night when I returned, every light in the apartment was on, buzzing faintly. The air smelled of bleach, sharp and chemical. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have filmed me." I deleted it without thinking. packed in silence, hands shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice. I left before sunrise. The apartment looked just as it had when I moved in, clean, neutral, lifeless. Only the bathroom door was closed. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. When I turned the key in the lock, it stuck for a moment like something inside was resisting. Then it gave, clicking free. I drove east until I hit the Columbia River. Found a temporary place with friends in Salem. The first week, I jumped at every sound. The second, I started to sleep again. By the third, Portland felt like something my mind had invented to punish me. Then the call came. A detective named Rains left a voicemail. "Mr. Caldwell, this is regarding your former residence on 9th Street. We'd like to ask a few questions." My chest went tight. I called back immediately. He told me they'd raided the apartment. The tenant, Victor Harlan, was gone. Disappeared, he said, but they'd found something beneath the bathtub. He didn't elaborate, but later I found the article online. Police discover hidden cash and photographs in abandoned apartment. It listed personal belongings, hair samples, dozens of candid photos, most of them depicting a sleeping man identified as Ethan Caldwell. I remember the sentence that froze me cold. Records indicate apartment 4B had been vacant for 3 years due to ongoing maintenance issues. I dropped my phone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Who had I been living with? It's been 5 years since Portland. I still avoid second-floor bathrooms and late-night noises. Therapy helped a little, but there are nights I still wake up at 3:07 a.m. sharp, heart pounding, certain someone's at the door. Sometimes I dream of that apartment, the sterile white walls, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint smell of bleach. I can see Victor moving quietly through the hall, deliberate, patient. I keep wondering if it could have gone differently, if I'd called the cops sooner or trusted my instincts instead of trying to be polite. People think fear comes from the unknown. I learned it often comes from what's too familiar. From the man who shares your kitchen, folds your towels, smiles just enough. When I left Oregon, I changed everything. My number, my hair, even my signature. But no matter where I go, I still double lock every door. And sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the mirror, I swear I see him behind me, head tilted, listening. Trust is a fragile thing, easy to give, nearly impossible to reclaim. We mistake politeness for safety, silence for peace. But real safety? It's in the small alarms we try to ignore, the ones whispering something's wrong. I remember the first time I stepped onto the campus of Lincoln State University, like it was a photograph burned into my memory. Vermont in early September smelled like wet leaves and faint wood smoke, the air sharp enough to make my lungs feel alive for the first time in months. I'd come determined, ambitious, trying to rebuild some version of independence after a year that had left me too dependent on others. Moving into my dorm, I clung to my rituals, unpack, organize, learn the paths between buildings. I liked knowing my surroundings, having small pockets of control, where my books went, how I made my coffee, the timing of my walks. Independence mattered more to me than popularity. I had friends, sure, but I'd learned the hard way to measure trust carefully. Then I met Seth. It was the second week of classes. I was struggling to balance 2 stacks of books from the library when he appeared beside me. Tall, easy smile, sharp eyes that noticed everything. "Need a hand?" he asked, stepping forward with casual confidence. I hesitated, then handed him one of the stacks. Thanks." He carried them like they weighed nothing. "I'm Seth," he said, flashing that effortless grin. "Senior." "Law," I replied, trying to match his calm tone. By the end of that day, he somehow already knew my schedule. When I studied late, where I liked my coffee quiet, which professors were toughest. At first it seemed thoughtful, friendly. He texted reminders to eat, told me to rest, offered to help with projects. "You're always working so hard," he said one night while I packed up. "Let me help out. Seriously, I've got time." It was flattering. Flattery always feels good at first, until it starts to suffocate. That first week of kindness laid the foundation for something that would slowly bend into control. I didn't notice right away. It started small. Seth just seemed to be everywhere, near my dorm, outside the library, always with a reason. "Thought I'd check on you," he'd say lightly. Just wanted to make sure you're okay. My friends told me I was overthinking it, that he just cared. But then came the criticism, small disguised as concern. Why are you texting him? He asked one afternoon, watching my phone. He's just a classmate, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I just want to make sure you're careful, he replied smoothly, almost playfully, but his eyes stayed cold. I started questioning myself. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe this was what care looked like. But unease settled in my chest, heavy and immovable. Then came the dorm party. It was nothing wild. Music low, people laughing, snacks scattered across a coffee table. Seth suggested a game of truth or dare. I laughed, thinking it was harmless. But as the night went on, his energy changed. Eyes sharp, smile fading. I dare you to kiss him, he said suddenly, nodding toward another guy. What? No, I don't. Come on, he interrupted, leaning closer. It's just a game. When I tried to step back, his hand clamped around my arm. The grip wasn't playful. It hurt. Do you think you can lie to me? He hissed. Tell me you liked it. His voice dropped, the charm gone. My pulse thundered in my ears. I'd ignored every warning sign. Let his attention feel like affection. Now it was control. Real. Physical. Terrifying. When his attention flicked elsewhere, I tore free and ran to my friend Hannah. We locked ourselves in the bathroom, my hands shaking as Seth pounded on the door, his voice turning from pleading to threats. Call campus security, I whispered. Within minutes, resident advisors arrived, followed by security. Seth was escorted away, silent but smiling in that same calm, unnerving way. He vanished after that, left school, disappeared. But the fear didn't leave with him. In the weeks that followed, even simple things, walking alone, studying late, became acts of vigilance. Independence no longer felt like freedom. It felt like survival. Walking to class felt like crossing a minefield. Every shadow in the hallway made me tense. A door creaking in the dorm at night felt like an intrusion. Even a text from an unknown number could send a cold ripple through me. Casual interactions became exercises in caution, filtered through the constant lens of self-preservation. My friends urged me to press charges, but the thought of sitting in a room, recounting what happened, reliving the fear, that felt unbearable. Shame tangled itself around the trauma, whispering doubts into every quiet moment. Was I too careless? Did I somehow invite it? The questions gnawed at me until I started to believe they had teeth. Hannah noticed before anyone else did. One night, as we sat in our shared study space surrounded by open notebooks and the hum of fluorescent lights, she said softly, "You'll be okay, Leah." I stared at my hands. What if it wasn't just that night? I whispered, what if he's done this to someone else? Hannah didn't rush to answer. She just reached over and squeezed my hand. Sometimes the only real comfort is silence, the kind that lets the weight of words breathe instead of smothering them with advice. I moved dorms soon after. Changed routines. Built my life around people I trusted completely. Freedom came back in fragments, small and fragile at first. But even years later, I could still hear the echo of Seth's voice, the polished charm that hid the cruelty underneath. Recovery wasn't a straight line. It was a maze. I started mapping my routes around campus, marking exits, quiet corners, familiar faces that made me feel safe. Every interaction became intentional. Every conversation a calculation. I learned to ask myself, who can I trust? Who deserves to be this close? The victories were small but sacred. Walking across campus without flinching. Ignoring a text from an unknown number. Laughing with friends without scanning the room. Each one felt like reclaiming a little more space from fear. Independence returned slowly, like sunlight filtering through heavy clouds. I began to journal, pages of details, patterns, and emotions. It wasn't just therapy. It was proof that I still existed beyond what happened. Writing grounded me. It turned the chaos into something I could name, control, even defy. The trauma didn't disappear, but documenting it made it smaller, less omnipotent. I met new people carefully, deliberately. Trust became something to earn, not something to hand out freely. I stopped mistaking attention for care or charm for safety. By October 2017, I'd settled into a quieter dorm with a small, tight circle of friends. My routines felt stable again. I walked the same paths with confidence, not because the fear was gone, but because I had learned how to carry it without letting it rule me. Even now, sometimes the memory flickers, the tension of that night, the shift in his eyes, the way control disguised itself as affection, but it doesn't own me anymore. I understand now that survival isn't just about escaping danger. It's about reclaiming the spaces fear tried to take. Sometimes, late at night, I whisper to myself, evil doesn't always roar. It smiles, it waits, it hides behind kindness until you stop paying attention. But once you learn to see it, really see it, you take its power away. Strength, I've learned, isn't loud. It's the quiet decision to draw boundaries, to walk away, to protect your peace even when charm or fear tries to convince you otherwise. It's the steady, silent courage to reclaim your autonomy and to never ever let anyone mistake control for love again. When I moved to Durham in the fall of 2019, I thought I was finally starting over. It was just me and my 7-year-old son, Theo. We found a modest 2-bedroom townhouse at 127 Maple Grove Road, small but clean, with a little playground tucked behind the complex. I told myself that quiet was good. Quiet meant safe. After 2 brutal years clawing my way out of a failed marriage and a half-collapsed business, I needed quiet. My ex-wife, Jenna, had left for someone steadier, a doctor in Raleigh. I didn't even blame her. Not really. I wasn't steady back then. The divorce hollowed me out, left me scrambling to be both father and provider. When I finally landed a few clients for my web design studio, it felt like a miracle. Life at Maple Grove was simple. I worked from home, took Theo to school, cooked macaroni, and tried to sleep without counting unpaid invoices in my head. My mom, Lydia, called twice a week just to remind me that routine is healing. I believed her. Then out of nowhere, Rachel Marsh messaged me on Facebook. I hadn't seen Rachel since college. She'd been part of our study group. Quiet, polite, the kind of girl who brought cookies before exams and blushed when people complimented her. I remembered her as sweet, maybe a little lonely. Her message read, "Hey stranger, I just moved to Durham and saw your post about the new place. Maybe I can help with Theo sometimes." She mentioned she worked at an elementary school nearby. Said she understood how hard single parenting could be. "Just until you get your schedule under control," she offered when we met for coffee. Her smile hadn't changed, soft around the edges, shy but genuine. When she first started helping, it felt natural. She'd pick Theo up from school when I was swamped with client calls. Drop off casseroles, fill the house with easy laughter. Theo adored her. She taught him how to fold paper cranes and made up bedtime stories about cloud kingdoms. It felt comforting, like a piece of the past had slipped quietly into the present. At first, I didn't notice her language changing. She started saying "our" when she talked about Theo. "Our little guy's so smart," she'd say, ruffling his hair. I'd laugh. "You mean my little guy?" She'd smile that same soft smile. Of course. I didn't think much of it. I wanted to believe that good people could drift back into your life and make it better. I wanted normal so badly that I ignored the faint warning bells echoing in the back of my mind. It started in November, right before Thanksgiving. Theo came down with stomach cramps, constant nausea, fatigue, headaches. The doctor said it was nothing serious, probably viral. Rachel came by with soup and a basket of gentle remedies. She always knew how to make me feel like things were under control. One night, taking out the trash, I noticed an empty box of children's laxatives in the bin. I hadn't bought any. The next morning I asked, "Rachel, did you give Theo something for his stomach?" She smiled too easily. "Oh, those? I thought they might help. I used to take them as a kid. Just a little." "Rachel," I said, keeping my voice steady, "that's not your call." She shrugged, still smiling. I was just helping. Her tone was light, but there was something in her eyes. A flicker, a sharpness hiding behind all that kindness. After that, she went quieter. Still came by, still smiled, but everything felt rehearsed, like she was playing a role. Then the text started, and late at night, too personal. "I heard you were out last night. Who was watching him? I worry when you ignore me. You know I care about both of you." I'd start to type, "I appreciate it," then delete it. Something about the way she wrote "both of you" made my stomach twist. That Christmas, my mom came to visit. The first thing she said when she walked in was, "That woman's in your kitchen more than you are." "She's helping," I said. Mom gave me that look. the one that said I was missing the obvious. "Aaron," she said softly, "helping doesn't mean moving in." I laughed it off, until she found the envelopes. There were maybe a dozen of them stacked neatly in the spare room closet. Different names. Same handwriting, all unmailed. The return addresses were all fake: Georgia, Ohio, Maryland. When I confronted Rachel, she looked almost relieved. "I didn't want you to see those," she said gently. "Who are they for?" I asked. "They're addressed to fake people," she said. "Sometimes names don't fit anymore." Her voice was calm, careful, like she was explaining something that made perfect sense in her head. That scared me more than if she'd screamed. Something about her calmness, like she'd already decided I wouldn't understand, stayed with me. After that, Rachel vanished. No calls, no texts. 2 weeks of silence. I told myself it was over, that she'd finally moved on. For the first time in months, I started sleeping through the night again. Then came the knock. It was a Thursday in February, gray and cold. When I opened the door, a man in a neat gray suit stood on my porch, a badge clipped to his belt. "Mr. Lane?" he asked. "Yeah." "Detective Hall?" he said, his tone polite but weighted. "You know a woman named Rachel Marsh?" My throat went dry. "She used to babysit my son. Why?" "There's an ongoing case in Charlotte," he said carefully. "A man named Jared Haynes. We believe she was married to him." "Married?" I repeated, my voice catching. He nodded. "She's had several marriages under different names. Mr. Haynes has been missing for 6 months." For a second, it felt like the world tilted, like I'd stepped off a curb I hadn't seen. I lied, told him I hadn't seen Rachel in weeks, that she was just a friend helping with childcare. He wrote something in his notebook, gave me his card, and left. That night, I didn't sleep. Every corner of the house looked wrong. The framed photos, the paper birds on the windowsill, the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the couch cushions. The air itself felt off, too still. When my mom, Lydia, heard, she drove down the next morning. She tore through the house like she was hunting for something invisible, opening drawers, closets, cabinets. Then she stopped in Theo's room. "Aaron," she said softly, "come look." I knelt beside her. Under Theo's bed was a small box tied with a blue ribbon. Inside were photographs. Theo playing in the yard, at the park, eating breakfast, all taken through the windows. I sat on the floor for a long time, just staring at them, trying to feel something other than disbelief. The truth unraveled slowly, piece by piece, through news reports, court documents, and late-night phone calls. Rachel Marsh wasn't her only name. There was Rachel Haynes, Rachel Leland, Rachel Dwyer, 5 marriages, 5 disappearances. They found Jared's body behind an abandoned farmhouse near Charlotte. Another man, a drifter named Greg Leland, confessed to helping her make things right. I watched the trial on TV. Rachel sat there exactly as I remembered. Calm, hands folded neatly in her lap, hair smooth, eyes fixed straight ahead. When the jury read life without parole, she didn't even blink. Theo was too young to understand. He asked once, "Is Miss Rachel coming back?" "No," I said quietly, forcing my voice steady. "She's gone." After that, I sold the townhouse on Maple Grove, moved north, changed numbers, deleted my Facebook. I tried to erase her. Every casserole dish, every folded letter, every echo of our little man. But some things don't stay gone. By 2023, life had settled again. Theo was 11 now, obsessed with baseball and comic books. We were okay, mostly. Then one day a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a paper bird, folded perfectly, its creases sharp and familiar. More came over the next few months. Always the same, no words. Just that perfect fold. "She can't send those," Lydia said when I told her. "She's in prison." "I know," I said, but I never threw them away right away. I'd leave them on the counter for a few days, unable to look but unable to toss them either. Sometimes I'd hear Theo humming softly while he drew. When I asked what tune it was, he'd shrug. Something Rachel used to sing. The first time I heard it, I froze. It was the same melody she'd hummed in the hallway once, at 3 in the morning. Soft, steady like a lullaby for someone she was watching. Even now, there are nights I wake up certain I hear it again, faint, distant, somewhere down the hall. I tell myself it's nothing, just memory echoing where trust used to live. But I still check the locks before bed. I still glance at the mailbox every morning with that same mix of dread and relief, because some people don't leave your life. They linger, quiet, patient like a song you can't stop hearing. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles, brings casseroles, and says it's just helping. The lesson I learned is simple. Kindness needs boundaries. Good hearts attract broken ones, but not every broken person wants to heal. You can't save someone by giving them access to your peace. And once trust is shattered, rebuilding isn't about fear. It's about learning the difference between generosity and surrender. Because monsters rarely break down the door. Most of the time, you hand them the key. When my family moved into Riverside Towers, I was 8, and the smell of fresh paint mixed with the damp breath of the Charles River clung to everything. The walls, the curtains, even our clothes. My mom, Laura, worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat after Dad lost his position at the shipping company. My older brother Ben was 12 then, full of sarcasm and growing resentment. He called our new apartment the shoebox. Still, even he admitted the balcony was something special. Narrow but facing the river, where thunderstorms rolled in like dark velvet curtains swallowing the skyline. Those summer nights were sticky, air heavy with humidity. The box fans hummed, the old pipes clanged like distant drums, and every sound seemed magnified in that too-small apartment. One night, I woke up thirsty and padded down the dim hallway toward the kitchen. That's when I saw it. Through the sliding balcony door, a shape. A dark figure, motionless. It wasn't facing me, not exactly, but it knew I was there. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. "Ben?" I whispered. Nothing. He was snoring softly in the next room. I flicked on the hall light and the figure was gone. In its place was only a faint smear on the glass, like a handprint pressed flat and left behind. My pulse thundered in my ears. It's the streetlights, I told myself. Just reflections. Just imagination. But over the following weeks came the tapping. Soft, irregular, like someone testing the glass. Ben shrugged it off. "Pigeons," he said. Mom was too tired to care. "Old buildings make noises," she murmured. But when I'd reach for the lock, it would feel cold. Too cold. Like someone had just touched it. By August, little things started to shift. Cereal boxes weren't where I'd left them. The remote would vanish only to reappear in strange places. And sometimes the chairs were turned toward the balcony door. Mom, worn down by double shifts, blamed herself. Ben blamed me. So I made a plan. I placed a small strip of masking tape over the door handle each night, a childish security measure. By morning, sometimes it was peeled loose. When school started, I stopped mentioning it. The tension in our home was already thick. Unpaid bills, Mom's crying in the kitchen, Ben slamming doors. A shadow on the balcony felt small compared to all that. Still, every night I'd glance at the glass, expecting to see something just beyond it. Watching. Years passed. Riverside Towers became the backdrop of our ordinary chaos. Homework, birthdays, the faint smell of mildew in the stairwell. But the small disturbances never truly ended. Sometimes I'd wake to find the living room door ajar, though I'd locked it, or the same chairs again angled toward the balcony. I told myself it was fatigue, stress, the mess of growing up in a family constantly on edge. Ben joined the Navy when I was 15. Mom remarried a few years later. By 2014, we moved into a duplex in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The new place had sunlight, a backyard, friendly neighbors, and a normal life. For a while, I believed I'd left the strangeness behind. Then in 2019, while clearing out the attic, I found an old moving box labeled Somerville. Inside were family photos, a cracked snow globe, and the metal handle from the sliding balcony door at Riverside Towers, wrapped carefully in a yellowed rag. I called Mom immediately. "They replaced the door before we left," she said slowly. "The super said it was damaged. So why do we have the handle?" I asked. There was a pause. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't keep it." Something cold moved through me, sharper than fear. That night, a draft crept through the upstairs hall. The attic hatch trembled lightly against the ceiling. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed up. The box was open. The handle lay on the floorboards, metal gleaming faintly in the beam. I stood there, heart hammering, telling myself it was nothing. Fatigue, imagination, always rational explanations. Yet a sick knot twisted in my stomach. A month later, Ben came home on leave. Over a couple of beers in the kitchen, I told him everything. "You remember Riverside Towers?" I asked. "Barely, why?" He smirked, half distracted. "That balcony. Someone used to stand there." He laughed. "You sure it wasn't me messing with you? You were jumpy as hell." "You were asleep, Ben," I said quietly. His grin faltered when I mentioned the handle. "That's weird," Ben admitted finally, setting his beer down. "The maintenance guy back then said someone kept breaking into the storage lockers. Thought it was a tenant hiding in the walls or something. A kid swore he saw someone standing on a balcony once, same floor as ours." His words hit harder than I expected. For years I'd told myself it was just a trick of light, imagination. But hearing that, it meant something had been there. Something real. Later that week, after Ben shipped out again, I heard footsteps. Above the ceiling this time. The attic. Slow, deliberate, evenly spaced, like someone walking without fear of being caught. "Probably raccoons," I muttered to myself, trying to sound convinced. I called out, voice shaky. "Hello?" Silence. Then, 3 measured taps from directly above me. Not scurrying. Not random, intentional. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I stood frozen for hours, listening until dawn. Nothing more came. When I finally gathered the courage to look the next morning, the attic hatch was hanging slightly open. And on the kitchen table below, set upright, impossibly balanced on its edge, was the broken balcony handle. I wanted to leave it there. I should have, but I couldn't. I wrapped it in a rag, shoved it back into the box, and pushed it deep into the attic corner. A month later, I moved out. Mom sold the duplex soon after, claiming the place felt too crowded. We never spoke about it again. Life moved on, or pretended to. In Chicago, working as a junior architect, I convinced myself that the memories of Riverside Towers were just residue from a chaotic childhood. Stress,
fear, imagination woven into the cracks of growing up. Then,
in February 2020, I got a call from a couple who had bought our old house at 14 Holloway Drive. "Is this M. Barrett?" the woman asked. "We found something in the attic. Thought it might belong to you." She sent a picture first, a sealed envelope addressed in faint pencil to Monsieur Barrett. Inside, she said, was a single Polaroid. When I opened the image on my phone, my breath caught. It was the balcony at Riverside Towers, taken from outside the glass. In the reflection, 2 kids sat watching TV, Ben and me. And behind us, half hidden by the flicker of the screen, stood something dark and blurred, its shape human but wrong. It was there. In the room, close enough to take that picture. Every rational explanation I'd built my adult life around collapsed in that moment. I could no longer tell myself it was the light or my imagination. Someone or something had been right there, unseen, threaded into the quiet of our lives. Since then, I've tried to reason it away. A prank, a misplaced photo, a camera trick. But the memories, those soft taps in the attic, the cold lock, the chairs turned toward the glass, they echo louder now that I know they weren't coincidences. Childhood fears don't dissolve. They ferment. They become part of how you move through the world. I still mark my doors. I still check the locks twice. Not out of superstition, out of habit. Because trauma doesn't vanish. It seeps into the spaces we live in. It teaches us vigilance. It reminds us that safety is fragile, that innocence is not the same as ignorance. There are shadows even in ordinary places. Hallways, attics, reflections. Sometimes the past isn't done with us. It reaches forward, testing what we believe to be real, what we trust as safe. If I've learned anything, it's this. Trust your instincts. Notice the small things. The world gives warnings and whispers, not shouts. Fear isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's the only thing keeping you aware of what's still standing just outside the glass. College had a way of teaching you 2 lessons at once: how to survive on nothing, and how to convince yourself that surviving on nothing was somehow fun. I learned both that summer when I moved into the old Victorian on Elmwood Lane with Leah Hart and Miles Donovan. The place had what people called character, which in real estate language meant peeling paint, uneven floors, and a backyard that smelled like wet leaves and forgotten rain. But the rent was cheap, and cheap rent makes saints out of skeptics. We were broke, overworked, half hungover, and desperate for something that looked like independence. So we told ourselves it was perfect. The first night, everything was chaos. Boxes everywhere. Leah insisted on lighting candles. "It'll make it cozy," she said, even though the draft through the crooked windows kept blowing them out. Miles was arguing with the landlord over the Wi-Fi. I was trying to figure out where my bed could fit without blocking the radiator. That's when we noticed the door. It sat at the far end of the hallway, thick, iron-bolted, nearly flush with the wall. It didn't match the other wooden doors, not even close. When I asked the landlord about it, he didn't blink. "Storage," he said flatly. "Never open it." His tone wasn't exactly threatening, but it killed any thought of curiosity. Leah frowned. "Why wouldn't we be able to open it?" He shrugged. "Old stuff. Don't touch it. Trust me." And that was that. The iron door became a ghost in our periphery. Always there, impossible to forget. For the first week, life felt mostly normal. There were little things. Faint whispers that didn't sound like wind, the smell of damp soil upstairs, chairs nudged a few inches from where we'd left them. Each time one of us mentioned it, the others laughed it off. "Old houses make noises," Miles would say, forcing a grin. Still, the unease lingered. Elmwood Lane was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your eardrums. At night, the shadows in the corners looked heavier, thicker, but we were young and poor, and poverty breeds tolerance. Cheap rent silences doubt better than reason ever could. Then came the storm, one of those violent summer nights where thunder feels personal and the air smells like wet asphalt. We sat in the living room with candles flickering, trying to pretend the wind wasn't shaking the whole house. That's when the chains on the basement door snapped. Not broke, slackened. The sound was a slow metallic drag across the floor, deliberate. We froze. The basement door had never moved before. Now it stood slightly ajar, as if the storm had finally given it permission. I tried to laugh, the sound brittle. "Probably just the wind, right?" Miles shook his head. "That wasn't wind, that was something else." The three of us stared. Leah's voice was barely a whisper. "We shouldn't open it." He said not to, but curiosity has teeth. I stepped forward before I even realized it, hand trembling, and pushed. The door creaked open. Cold air rolled out, thick and damp, smelling of earth and mildew. The basement was lined with Polaroids, hundreds of them, pinned to the concrete walls. Each photo showed a person asleep in bed, perfectly framed, some close enough you could see the threads in their pillowcases. Our laughter died. "This has to be a prank," I managed, my throat tight. Leah's hand covered her mouth. No one else should even have a key. Then Miles whispered, "Oh my God." I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop. One of the Polaroids showed us, standing in the basement doorway exactly as we were now. Leah gasped. Miles took a step back. "That wasn't here before." We bolted, raced up the stairs, slammed the door, and yanked the chain tight. That night, none of us slept. We tried to rationalize, to laugh it off, but every creak in the floor sounded like footsteps. Around 3 a.m., we heard it again, the faint click of something metallic below us, like pins or claws dragging lightly across the wood. After that, sleep became impossible. Leah started keeping her light on. Miles tried to act unfazed, but I caught him jumping at his own reflection in the window once. By the end of the week, small things began to move. A coffee mug left on the counter. Leah's notebook. Miles's headphones. Never stolen, never broken, just moved. Enough to make you question your own memory. Leah stayed up late after that, tracing the edges of the Polaroids we'd taken down, her eyes hollow. Sometimes I'd find her whispering to herself, staring toward that door as if waiting for it to whisper back. I'd catch Leah whispering to herself in the kitchen, her fingers tracing invisible shapes across the tabletop, like she was trying to remember something she couldn't say out loud. "Maybe it's someone squatting here," I told her one night, my voice low. "A kid, maybe. Or someone using the basement without us knowing." She shook her head slowly, strands of hair falling into her eyes. "No," she said. "It's not people. Not real people." I wanted to tell her to stop, to breathe, to not make it worse, but the words caught in my throat, because she wasn't wrong. The sense of being watched had become constant, quiet like static under the skin. The air itself felt aware. Sometimes at night the house seemed to breathe, deep, steady, almost human. Or maybe it was just the floor settling. But then came the Polaroids. They appeared in the living room one morning. More of them. Pictures of us standing in the basement doorway again, only closer to the camera this time. The angles were impossible. No one else could have taken them. We hadn't been down there since the storm. By mid-August, the weather had calmed, but we hadn't. The house seemed to pulse with a slow, hidden rhythm. Every time we passed the basement door, the metal chain rattled faintly like it knew we were there. One evening, desperate to get out, we decided to run to the corner store. Just a quick errand. But as we stepped outside, I saw it. Movement in the attic window, a shape. Small, hunched, unmistakably human, watching. "Do you see that?" I whispered. Miles didn't answer. Laya grabbed my arm and we ran. The rain had turned the street into a shallow river, water swirling around our shoes, cold and filthy. My heart hammered so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. When we came back, soaked and shaking, the basement door was closed again, chained tight, exactly as the landlord had left it. But the smell of wet earth hung heavy in the hallway, thick and raw, like something freshly unearthed. That night I dragged my blankets into the living room, left the lights on, locked every door. None of us spoke. Not about the attic, not about the photos. Silence became its own kind of pact. Fragile, necessary, terrifying. We left the next morning. Didn't pack properly, didn't look back. Just walked away from the whispers, from the Polaroids, from that pulsing sense of being seen. I still keep one of those Polaroids tucked into my sketchbook. The edges have curled with age, the paper gone soft from my fingers. It shows the three of us in the basement, eyes wide, faces half lit, caught mid-breath. Years later, Laya, Miles, and I still joke about Elmwood Lane, though the laughter never feels real. Whenever one of us moves into a new place, someone always texts the same thing. "Check your door tonight," we laugh.
We always laugh.
But none of us ever sleep well afterward. Old houses have character, sure, but sometimes that character watches. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it remembers you. And I've learned something since then. Curiosity and carelessness make a dangerous mix. The things we ignore, the warnings we shrug off, they linger. Not all threats are malicious or even supernatural. Some are human, some are history, some are the quiet eyes behind a door you were told never to open. I never thought nostalgia could kill you, but looking back, I guess that's where it started. Our desperate, stupid attempt to relive something we should have left buried. It was October 2019 when Connor made the group chat. The five of us, me, Jade Miller, Connor Hayes, Tessa Lau, Evan Parker, and Miles Whitman, hadn't talked in almost 10 years. Life got in the way. Jobs, families, excuses that felt valid until that little notification pulled us right back into the rhythm we'd left behind in Ashwood, Pennsylvania. The chat was called Senior Year Legends. At first it was innocent. We joked about bad cafeteria food, sent blurry prom pictures, old memes, yearbook photos we wished had died with flip phones. It felt warm, familiar, the kind of comfort that lingers until you put your phone down and the silence feels heavier than it used to. Then, late one night, a new notification popped up. Mara Whitfield joined the chat. I froze. My thumb hovered above the screen. My heart stuttered hard against my ribs. No, that wasn't possible. Mara had died the spring of our senior year. April 2010, a single-car crash on County Road 14. We'd all gone to her funeral. I could still picture the wilted flowers, the way her mom refused to let go of the casket. Hey everyone, missed you all. The message glowed against the dark screen like a wound. Miles sent the first reply. Very funny. Who's screwing around? No one answered. Evan texted Connor privately in the group. You add someone? Not me, Connor wrote. Swear to God. Then Mara, or whoever it was, sent a photo. The Ashwood High gym, empty and dimly lit, the scoreboard casting a dull red glow. None of us remembered taking it. The date stamp said March 12, 2010, the day before our senior pep rally. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe someone hacked an old account. Maybe this was someone's idea of dark humor. But then she posted another picture, Us standing by our lockers, smiling at something out of frame. A photo none of us had ever seen. That night I dreamt of the crash site, the twisted guardrail, the sound of shattering glass, the fog, and beneath it all a voice whispering my name. When I woke up, my phone was vibrating. A new message. Reunion soon. We tried deleting the chat. It came back. Every time. Connor even wiped his phone completely. Factory reset. And still there it was again the next morning. The messages grew stranger. She started sending photos. Some were old, but some weren't. One showed the parking lot behind my apartment. Another, Tessa's car parked outside the grocery store. We tried to rationalize it. Evan said maybe someone had access to Mara's old cloud backup. Tessa called it a sick prank, someone from our class messing with us. But then she sent something that broke all logic. A picture of my bedroom, taken from outside my window. The caption said, "Missed you most, Jade." I dropped my phone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. That night, every sound in my apartment felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the creak of pipes, the soft thud of something settling. Around 2:17 a.m., a ping echoed from my nightstand. "Why did you lie about that night?" I didn't reply. I couldn't even bring myself to unlock the screen. By morning, I texted the group. "We need to meet in person." We agreed on Connor's place. Neutral ground. Saturday afternoon. Sunlight, neighbors, safety in numbers. When we got there, Connor already had the chat open on his laptop. The screen flickered like the messages were being typed right then. "You shouldn't have left me. You laughed when I cried. Reunion soon." Evan slammed the laptop shut. "This is messed up." But the second he did, the TV in the corner turned on. Static. Then faint laughter. A girl's voice. Tessa bolted for the door. Miles stayed. He just stared at the screen. "It's her," he whispered. "It's really her." I wish I could say we all left together. We didn't. That night, Miles messaged me privately. "I'm going to find out what she wants." I begged him not to. Told him to drop it, block the number, call the cops. He didn't reply. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at my door. No return address, just my name, written in looping cursive I hadn't seen since 2010. Inside was a photograph of the County Road 14 crash site, Mara's accident scene. The car was long gone, but the guardrail still bowed inward, rusted and broken. A faint shadow stretched across the asphalt, shaped like a person standing just beyond the edge of the frame. At the bottom, in smeared ink, someone had written, "Meet me where it all ended." Midnight. Alone. I didn't need to ask who it was for. Miles would go. Reckless, impulsive Miles, who always treated fear like a dare and consequence like a story for later. We tried to stop him. Dozens of texts. Missed calls. Voicemails that never played back. Nothing. At 12:07 a.m., Connor texted the group. He's not answering. The next morning, Miles was gone. His phone, his car, everything. The police said he must have left town. Maybe a breakdown, maybe guilt. But we knew better, because that night another photo appeared in the chat. The crash site again. Same angle, same faint shadows. But this time, there was someone else standing in the picture. Miles, pale, hollow-eyed, looking straight into the camera. The caption, "Reunion has begun." After that, the rest of us barely spoke. It wasn't that we didn't want to. It was that words had stopped meaning anything. Everything we said felt too small, too late. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. Maybe someone was tormenting us. Maybe Mara's death had made us easy targets. But then I remembered the night of the crash, the things we'd never told anyone. Back in 2010, we'd been drinking at the old quarry, half drunk on cheap beer and teenage invincibility. Mara wanted a ride home. She wasn't sober enough to drive, and we all knew it. But we laughed it off. Connor tossed her the keys, smiling that careless, stupid grin. "You're fine, Mara," he said. "It's 5 minutes away." She wasn't fine. When the police found her, her car was folded around the guardrail like paper. We told ourselves she left on her own, that we didn't see her go. But the truth? We let her. We watched her walk toward her car and said nothing. Now it felt like she remembered. The messages turned personal. You said you'd watch out for me. You promised. Reunion soon. Every ping felt like a pulse in my throat. One night, Tessa called, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "She's in my dreams, Jade," she whispered. Standing by my bed, just staring. I didn't know what to say. I just listened. The next day, her apartment burned down. Electrical fire, the report said. But in the ashes, they found a melted phone. The screen was frozen on one message thread: reunion complete. By March 2020, only 3 of us were left: me, Connor, and Evan. Connor had stopped sleeping. He'd text at 3 a.m., just ellipses or single words like sorry or remember. Evan started keeping a bat by his bed, swore he heard footsteps outside his window every night. I deleted everything: Facebook, Instagram, the group chat app. I changed numbers, even moved apartments, but none of it mattered. The night before the lockdowns began, another envelope appeared under my door. No stamp. No handwriting this time, just my name printed on a plain white label. Inside was a single Polaroid. Our senior year group photo, but now there were 6 people in it. Mara stood right beside me, smiling faintly. Below, written in red ink, "All together again." That night my phone buzzed once more. Reunion soon. But this time it didn't come from the chat. It came from my own number. I stared at the screen until it went black. My reflection hovered in the glass, except there was someone standing just behind me, faint and still. For the first time in 10 years, I said it out loud. My voice cracked like a confession. "I'm sorry, Mara." The light flickered. The phone buzzed again. I've learned since then that the past doesn't stay buried, not when it's built on guilt and silence. Mara Whitfield's story isn't just a ghost story, it's a reckoning. Because when you ignore the consequences of what you've done, when you bury the truth under laughter and nostalgia, you don't escape the haunting, you become it. The real horror isn't the supernatural. It's the weight of what we leave undone, the apologies we never say until it's too late. You can't outrun the truth. The things we try to forget are often the ones that remember us the most. Moving into a new house should have felt exciting, but that first night, all I felt was exhaustion. Cedar Ridge was quiet, too quiet. The little 2-bedroom place had a fenced yard, a small kitchen, and a living room that caught the afternoon light just right. It smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old carpet, but to me it smelled like freedom. Finally, a space that was mine. A place where I could start over after the accident that left me in a wheelchair. I wheeled slowly through each room, running my hands along the walls, testing doorways, picturing the life I wanted to rebuild. Calm, safety, routine, those were the things I craved now. But I also knew solitude could turn sharp. That's when Sarah, my best friend, suggested she and her boyfriend Jordan stay with me for a while. I hesitated. I needed peace, not company. But she'd promised it would be temporary, quiet, and helpful. "I swear, Clara," she said that first afternoon, setting her bags by the door. "We'll follow your rules. No pets, no loud music. We'll help out, okay?" It sounded reasonable, and against my better judgment, I agreed. For a few days, things were fine. Sarah helped with laundry. Jordan read in the corner, barely talking. The house felt calm again. Then the pit bull arrived. Sarah stood in the doorway, waving her phone like proof of innocence. "Look at him, Clara. He's just a puppy. You'll love him." I frowned. "He's already huge, Sarah. He knocked my chair over this morning." "What happens when he decides to lunge at someone?" She rolled her eyes. "Relax, he's still learning." Jordan barely looked up from the couch. It wasn't just the dog. The dishes piled up, trash overflowed, and my careful routine dissolved into chaos. I tried to stay calm. "Please," I said one night, voice tight, "you can't leave it like this. I can't get around." Sarah waved me off. "It's your house, but we live here too. You don't have to control everything." Her tone stung. I bit my tongue and reminded myself it was temporary. Still, tension crept into every room, every breath. Then chaos turned dangerous. The dog grew meaner, teeth bared when I tried to pass. Sarah ignored it and Jordan stayed silent. The air in the house thickened with resentment. One afternoon, Sarah's mother showed up without warning. Elaine, short, sharp-voiced, eyes like cold metal. "This place is filthy," she said, wrinkling her nose. "You need to take better care of it." I clenched my hands. I've managed fine, thank you. I have a routine. Your routine doesn't look like responsibility to me, she snapped. I tried to ignore her, but the tension only built. The dog tore the furniture. Garbage littered the yard. Every time I said something, I felt the temperature drop. It came to a head one afternoon. This isn't working, I told them, gripping the sides of my chair. The dog, the mess, it's too much. None of this respects me or my home. Elaine moved fast. Her hand shoved the armrest and my chair tipped backward. I hit the floor hard, pain shooting up my spine. Jordan froze mid-step. Sarah stood there wide-eyed and trembling, but she didn't move. The neighbors must have heard the crash. The police came. I spent a night in the hospital, bruised, humiliated, numb. They promised to leave. No charges were filed. When I came home, the house felt wrong, heavy. Every corner carried a shadow of what happened. I rearranged furniture, locked every door twice, tried to reclaim the silence. This is mine now, I whispered as I stacked books on the shelf. But at night, the quiet felt watchful. Shadows seemed to pause just outside my door. I swore I heard the faint scrape of nails against the floor, a low breath where no one stood. Weeks passed, then months, but their presence lingered, like a stained memory refused to wash out. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps pacing the hallway or the echo of a bark that wasn't there. Objects shifted slightly from where I'd left them. My body tensed with every gust rattling the windows. So I started writing everything down. What time I woke, what I heard, what moved. Routine became survival. And somehow, through that quiet, obsessive order, I began to feel safe again. Or at least learned to pretend I was. Even the smallest victories, cooking a meal without flinching, rolling into the yard without that familiar rush of anxiety, felt monumental. But the trauma had left its fingerprints on everything. I noticed how cautious I'd become around people, how I studied their tones and gestures before trusting a word. Motives that once seemed harmless now felt layered, suspect. Trust, which I used to give freely, had turned into something earned through time and quiet consistency. Every phone call made me brace. Every knock at the door sent a ripple of unease through me. Sarah called once, months later. Her voice cracked through the line, soft and remorseful. "I'm so sorry, Clara," she said. "For the mess, for my mom, for everything." I sat there listening, nodding even though she couldn't see me. "I know," I said quietly, and I did. But forgiveness and access weren't the same thing. I couldn't let her back in, not even a trace of her. The house had taught me a cruel but necessary truth. Even when your walls feel solid, danger can come from those who say they love you most. By 2016, I'd rebuilt my rhythm. New locks, clean rooms, silent mornings. I screened visitors carefully, learning to pause before granting anyone entry. I buried myself in work, editing manuscripts, organizing my days into precise, calm blocks of time. But the ghosts of that house clung to me. Sometimes I'd stop mid-task, heart hammering, certain I'd heard the pit bull's nails scraping across tile or Elaine's sharp voice cutting through the air. I knew they were gone. Logic told me that. But my body didn't listen. My body remembered. Meeting new people became an exercise in restraint. I made friends slowly, testing boundaries, pulling back when I felt cornered. It wasn't just about physical safety anymore. It was about emotional survival. And somewhere within that vigilance, I discovered strength. The accident had taken my mobility, but the aftermath had built something harder to destroy. Resilience. Every night spent alone was proof of endurance. Every door I locked, every quiet morning I built from scratch, was a reminder that I owned my space and myself. By November 2017, I decided to sell Cedar Ridge. Letting go was harder than I expected. The house held my pain, but it also held proof of my recovery. Still, it was time. The silence there had turned from healing to haunting. My new apartment in Lexington was smaller but safer. I chose every piece of furniture deliberately, left nothing to chance. My 2 cats explored freely, unbothered by tension that no longer existed. The nights were gentler now, though sometimes the wind rattled the windows just right and I'd tense for half a second, expecting a bark or a laugh that never came. But I didn't freeze anymore. I breathed through it. I had learned to respond, to live, not out of fear, but out of control. Survival, I realized, isn't just about endurance. Sometimes it's about letting go of the people who claim to care but poison the air around you. Sometimes it's walking away from a place you once called home so you can finally find peace. I wrote less in my journal, but when I did, my words became mantras. Boundaries are sacred. Trust is earned. Freedom is worth the price of solitude. True strength, I've learned, isn't suffering quietly. It's recognizing when something or someone is unraveling your peace, setting firm limits, and having the courage to reclaim your life, even if it means closing the door on those you once loved.